I remember graduation being a very grand time for me. I got invited to parties that I had wanted to go to, the places to be, and I had a wonderful time. And then after that, I was off to college. My salad days were dwindling. The time was ticking away. College was a shaky proposition to begin with. None of us knew anything about it. My parents had never gone to college. We had never really talked about what it was going to be like. To Mom and Dad, college meant access to the larger world, something they wanted their kids to have. In the end, I decided to go to Texas Tech, 300 miles away, and enroll in their architecture program. Mom and Dad drove me there, and Dad, recognizing the special moment, said something to me in his inimitable way that I never forgot. "You know, you've got a talent. You can play guitar and you can sing. Not everybody can do that, but that doesn't make you any better than anybody else. Just remember that." That statement summed up Dad's democratic, egalitarian credo. He was acknowledging my ability, but he didn't want me to get too big for my britches. I think that stuck with me because it was such a clear communication. He was telling me the thing he most wanted me to know. It was one of the few pieces of advice he ever gave me, and one of the most meaningful things I ever learned. Frankly, college itself was a trial, although a manageable one, at least for a couple of years. I wasn't a scholar, but I got through. What made me happy, and what kept me at school, was the music I was making, and sometimes getting paid for. My gigs provided just about the only money I had, but it was enough. My folks paid most of the bills, and Texas Tech was a state school. Money didn't matter there as long as you had some in your pocket. Actually, it was a great environment for an artist. I sang with a group called the Alpine Trio, and sometimes I sang by myself. Even in the dorm, I was the troubadour. But school was not what I was interested in. Architecture was not what I was interested in. And in the third year, I started out really distracted, and I cannot remember why. Life? The future? I don't know. It was another adolescent crisis with no voice. That November, John Kennedy was assassinated, and I, like the rest of the world, was inconsolable. That Christmas, I went home to Florida, where my folks were now living. Dad had retired from the Air Force. I drove down hoping to be open with them, hoping they'd help me figure out what I wanted to do. But we had a terrible time. I was very tense. It was what you feel before you make a break. And Dad and I were at each other's throats. When I went back to school, I gave myself an ultimatum. Either do better than average in the marking period coming up, or leave school. The time had come to either get music out of my system so that I could take school seriously, or to see how far I could go with my music. At the end of the month, I had the answer, like a throw of the I Ching. Everybody I knew, from my professors to my friends, told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. And Dad expressed his displeasure in a letter. He wrote me 3 times in my life, and each was a letter of such condemnation that afterward all you could do was look for an oven to put your head in and end it all. But this was the best of them. It had a silver lining. He chewed me out pretty good for what I was doing, but then he said, "If that's what you want to do, what you have to do, then you should do it. See where it goes. If you get into trouble, we're here. And when you get tired of screwing around and want to go back to school, we're here for that too." The envelope contained a check for $250, which was a lot of money to me. The letter was more moving than I've described it, and I knew the love it contained. I may never have experienced a more profound expression of my father's love and concern. Here I was writing off everything that my parents believed in, everything they hoped for me, and they let me go with their blessing. City of Angels. I drove from Phoenix on in through San Bernardino to Pasadena and then to Los Angeles, and was amazed at how it had all grown together. It was all city, and though I'd been there before, it was like seeing it for the first time. That first day I drove down Sunset Boulevard and saw the RCA building. I thought about Elvis Presley and Paul Anka, and said to myself, maybe someday you'll sing for RCA. Wishes sweeter than wine. I had a lot of those in my first freewheeling days. I can still conjure up the physical sensation of driving through Hollywood and going under the bridge at Mulholland and down into the San Fernando Valley. When the smog settled in, you could not see the mountains, which were only 13 miles away. But on a clear day, they appeared amazingly close. I couldn't believe how beautiful they were. The only L.A. club I'd heard of before now was the Troubadour. The Christy Minstrels' first hit album was called Live at the Troubadour, so I was mildly surprised to learn about all these other places. It really opened my eyes. Of course, the city itself was a revelation to me. People didn't live in houses. They lived in apartment buildings, especially just off the freeway, and it seemed that all the apartments were full of young people just beginning to make their way in the world. I think it fed my ego when I realized that people my age were still in college. Being a college dropout in that place and time was no disadvantage. All of these clubs had folk music and hootenannies, a night when the stage was open to people who walked in from the street. Although I had planned for my open stage debut to be at the hip and trendy Troubadour, debuting at the Ice House turned out to be just as inspiring. The next week I performed at Ledbetter's, Randy Sparks' place in Westwood, where all the UCLA kids hung out. At their hootenanny on Sunday, I sang 4 songs, and Randy was knocked out by my voice. He was having a great deal of success with the Christy Minstrels at that time, and said he'd be interested in recording me. If I remember correctly, I took Dave Frackman with me to Gold Star Studios and taped 4 songs for Randy and Jack Daly, who was Randy's manager, and soon to be mine, to take around. I cast my creative seed upon the water and waited for something to happen. It didn't take long. When I went by Ledbetter's to check on my tape, Jack Daly not only offered me a job for $100 a week as opening act for the Back Porch Majority, which was like a farm club for the Christy Minstrels, but also a room at a place of Randy's, the quaintly named Folk House in Encino, where all the members of the Back Porch Majority lived. Living there was, on some level, a reenactment of my college dorm life. Except for working at the club, I spent all my time in the house, shy and reclusive as always, learning songs. Mike Crowley, who was the real musician of the group, kind of took me under his wing. He loved my voice. He taught me the Bells of Rimney, a song I played on a 12-string guitar, which became one of my staples. Ledbetter's was on Westwood Boulevard, between Wilshire and Santa Monica. My act ran about 20 minutes. I think the first week or so I sang the same 4 songs over and over. I didn't know any others that were appropriate. But before long my repertoire was expanding. I developed my own small following who joined the growing lines of people waiting to get in on the weekends, and I started running the Sunday night hootenanny, signing up the performers and introducing the acts. On Monday night, I would go to the Troubadour. It was around this time that folk was evolving into folk rock. The Beatles had already made a beachhead in America, and in 1965, Bob Dylan would appear at the Newport Folk Festival playing an electric guitar. Very different events, but both catalysts for change. Around this time, at Randy's urging, I acquired a stage name. I had no problem with Dutchendorf, but he and Jack Daly were convinced that I needed a more mellifluous-sounding tag if a career in recording was to be my future. They suggested I call myself John Somerville. I chose Denver, which I associated with the Rocky Mountains, and I identified with those mountains. A name isn't easy to give up, but on the other hand, I wasn't going to let anything stop me from pursuing every chance I got to be in the business. If these guys thought Dutchendorf wouldn't fit on the record label, then Denver it would be. In the fall of 1964, I bought myself a brand new Ford Mustang convertible, using a bank loan that Randy co-signed. With a salary of $100 a week, no rent to pay, a 20-minute show, and good encores, I figured I must be a success in the world, and I wanted to show it. The transformation was complete. I did have one girlfriend that first year in L.A., a real sweetheart, who was a student at UCLA and living away from home for the first time. It breaks my heart to remember how puritanical I was with her. And there she was, pining for me to love her. She told me later that if she had tripped me, she would have beaten me to the floor. Where I came from, you just didn't sleep with anyone before the 2 of you were married. I never even allowed the thought to seriously pass through my mind, sober soul that I was. I was much too serious for my own good. However, that Christmas I underwent a metamorphosis. I knew I was developing my musical talents at Ledbetter's, but that's about all. It seemed as if nothing was coming from Randy's overtures to Capitol Records on my behalf. My 21st birthday was approaching, and suddenly, with the force of a wind rising, I felt the urge to take matters in hand. Don't ask me what my specific thoughts were, but nature wasn't going to be denied. Randy gave me some time off, and antsy for travel, I split town for a month. It was one of the most eventful months of my young life. Christmas with the folks in Florida, where I went first, was a disaster. On the other hand, the club date I got myself on the way back in Houston at Max Webster's club, The Jester, was a bit of a triumph. I was originally engaged to play there for 2 weeks, but due to popular demand it was extended to 4. The Kingston Trio, performing at another club in Houston, came by to hear me one night, and when I returned the visit, they introduced me from the floor and praised my show. One night the audience included Alan Lomax, whose songbook had become one of my Bibles. Most significantly to me, I lost my virginity on that trip. She was a young girl working at the club. We went to dinner one night, and I came on about wanting to sleep with her. Where I got the courage for that, I don't know. It must have come in the wake of feeling successful